KOSA is a bill, the so-called Kids Online Safety Act, and it purports to be a bill about protecting minors from, like, dangerous or otherwise material that would expose them to mental health problems, expose them to abuse, trauma, that kind of thing. And I'm all for this kind of aim, but the implementation of this bill is sloppy in a way that's very dangerous. The big problem about the bill is the enforcement mechanism, where with KOSA, attorney generals at the state level, it's up to them to decide what material they think is appropriate or inappropriate for children. So if you're living in a red state and you have a Republican attorney general that thinks that all queer people are grooming children, then that Republican attorney general can decide that no queer material can be shown to kids online. And this extends up to, I believe it's like ages 16 is what the bill covers. A 16-year-old wouldn't be able to access any kind of like LGBTQ support resources. And this could even include things like the Trevor Project, which is like a suicide prevention hotline designed to help queer people with the particular needs and problems that queer people face. Essentially, it just creates a world where bigots can decide to censor important information for teenagers that's going to be really harmful. And there's also some other privacy violations in this bill too, where I think it's important to recognize that, like, especially as somebody starts becoming a teenager, a little bit older, their data privacy matters too. And this bill requires collecting a lot of personally identifiable information of these minors, which is a concern, especially in more conservative states again. We've seen states like Texas and Tennessee create lists of trans people that they've collected from medical records, from like DMV records. For what purpose? We don't know yet. But that's very scary that they're trying to come up with lists of all the trans people in a given state to follow them or like otherwise do something to them. And this bill would make this a lot easier to do, especially with like minors, which is even more concerning. I think that the topic of like online safety for minors in general is a really complicated, nuanced issue, but this bill just isn't it. Like, there are certainly things we can do to better empower and protect minors online. I think that having educational resources that are available, government-sponsored educational resources that are designed to help kids be able to identify and prevent things like abuse, things like other like inappropriate material that they might encounter online. Just like giving people the power to be like, hey, here's some tips for staying safe online. Here's how you can, recognize if somebody's trying to like do something abusive. And if that happens, it's important to tell a trusted adult. Putting out information about safety and security that is an across the board standard is a much better way to like actually help protect kids online. Ultimately, like, so much of this kind of like abuse that actually happens in the real world is due to kids that just didn't even know any better. You'll find it's the case that like when kids are abused this way, they don't even know that they were abused until much later in life when they like talking with a therapist and the therapist is like, that was abuse. That's typically how these situations go. What we need is education, not censorship. And especially putting censorship in the hands of Republican attorney generals is not the way to do this. It's very similar to the Don't Say Gay bill, where because of this fear of censorship, having to comply with this government regulation, it encourages social media sites to overcorrect. Just like how in the Don't Say Gay bill, because it was intentionally left vague, such that like what exactly you're not allowed to say, schools were overcorrecting by pulling out all of their LGBT inclusive curriculum just so they don't get targeted by any kind of lawsuit. And social media sites might be incentivized to do the same. They might be incentivized to say, like, ban everyone under the age of 17 from the platform, which could take a lot of genuine community education support resources away from teenagers in need. And that's a real problem. And so, yeah, this bill is just not it. And I think it's important to talk about because, like, it highlights a lot of the issues that are currently facing a lot of, like, vague bills, a lot of, like, states' rights bills, and how they're just weaponized to cause harm selectively based off of the state that you live in.